I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter and just stood there for a second, staring at the back of it, like it might tell me something different if I waited long enough. It didn't. My best friend's name was still on that screen. And so was my wife's. I'm not going to tell you I had some dramatic breakdown. I didn't throw anything. I didn't scream. I just picked up my keys, walked out to my truck, and sat in the driveway for about 20 minutes. Neighbors probably thought I was crazy. Guy just sitting in his own driveway at 9:30 on a Tuesday night. Engine off, not going anywhere. That was the night everything changed. Not because of what I did next, but because of what I decided not to do. My name is Adrian. I'm 34 years old. I work in logistics for a mid-size freight company out of Columbus, Ohio. I've got a good job, a decent salary, and until about 8 months ago, I thought I had a pretty good life too. My wife, I'll call her my wife because that's what she still legally was at the time. Her name is Laurel. We met in college. Dated for 3 years, got married when we were both 26. We had a house in a quiet suburb, 2 cars, a dog named Biscuit, and all the things people are supposed to want. I thought we were happy. Looking back, I think I was the only one of us who actually believed that. My best friend's name is Callum. We'd been close since high school. He was the best man at my wedding. He gave a toast that made Laurel cry and made half the room laugh. He's the guy I called when my dad had his first heart attack. He's the guy who drove 4 hours to help me move into our house because I couldn't afford professional movers at the time. 13 years of friendship. 13 years. I found out on a Tuesday. I came home from a work trip. I'd been in Cincinnati for 2 days meeting with a client. And I was tired and I just wanted to eat something and go to sleep. Laurel wasn't home yet. Dropped my bag by the door, grabbed a glass of water, and my phone buzzed. It was a text from Callum, except it wasn't meant for me. He'd sent it to the wrong number. My number, not hers. It said, "She's home tonight, I can't. Tomorrow after he leaves for work." Just that. No context needed. I stood there and read it 3 times, 4 times. I wish I could tell you I immediately confronted somebody or demanded answers. I didn't. I put the phone down, I went and sat in my truck in the driveway. And I just sat there. I knew I didn't need more proof. Something in my gut had already filed the paperwork. But I got more proof anyway. Not because I went snooping. Because over the next 72 hours, once I knew what to look for, I saw it everywhere. The way she angled her phone away when she texted at dinner. The way she said Callum's name just a half second too casually when I mentioned him. The way she came home at 6:30 on Thursday and said she'd been at the gym. And I could see from her hair that she absolutely had not been at the gym. I didn't say a word. On Saturday morning, I told Laurel I was going to help my buddy from work move some furniture. I drove to Callum's apartment complex. His car was in the lot, so was hers. I sat there for 40 minutes. Then I drove home, let Biscuit out into the backyard, and made myself a sandwich. And I thought very carefully about what I wanted my life to look like. Here's something people don't tell you about moments like this. The initial shock doesn't last long. What replaces it is something colder, quieter. I wasn't heartbroken in the way I expected. I was, and this sounds strange, I was almost calm. Like something had finally clicked into place. Like I'd been sensing a problem in the foundation for a long time, and now I finally knew where the crack was. I did not call anyone. I did not text anyone. Just started thinking. The first thing I did was call my bank on Monday morning, on my lunch break, from my car in the parking lot at work. I had our joint checking account, and one personal savings account that only had my name on it. I moved everything I could justify moving into the personal account, and shifted a portion into a new account at a completely different bank. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would trigger a flag. Just quiet repositioning of my own money. Then I called an attorney. I'd looked up divorce lawyers in Columbus the night before. I found one with strong reviews specifically for cases involving marital infidelity. In Ohio, fault-based divorce exists and it matters for asset division. I made an appointment for that Wednesday afternoon. I told my boss I had a dentist appointment. The attorney, a sharp woman in her 50s named, well, I'll just call her my attorney. She looked at me across her desk and said, "Walk me through what you know." I walked her through it. She nodded slowly and then she asked me something I hadn't expected. "How long do you need before you want to file?" I said, "A few weeks. I need to get some things in order," she said. "Okay, keep documenting. Don't confront either of them yet. Don't change your behavior at home." I nodded. I paid the consultation fee and I drove back to work. And I sat at my desk, and I did my job, and nobody in that office had any idea that my marriage was ending. The next 2 weeks were the strangest of my life. I came home every night. I ate dinner with Laurel. I watched TV with her on the couch. I was normal. Or I acted normal. Inside I was running through a checklist. I quietly moved my most important personal documents, passport, birth certificate, social security card, to a lockbox I bought at a hardware store and kept in my truck. I made digital copies of everything, and stored them in a personal cloud account she had no access to. I photographed every piece of financial paperwork I could find. Tax returns, mortgage documents, bank statements going back 2 years. I also started to think about the other thing. The part that wasn't just Laurel. Callum. 13 years. I'm not going to pretend that part didn't hurt. In some ways it hurt more. You expect your marriage to have vulnerabilities. That's not cynicism, that's just realism. But your best friend? The guy who stood up at your wedding? That's a different kind of betrayal. That's the kind that makes you question your own ability to read people. Makes you wonder what else you missed. What else was right there in front of you the whole time? I didn't contact him. I went back through 13 years of memories and I let myself be sad about it for exactly one night. A Friday I remember, because I drove out to a state park about 40 minutes outside the city and sat by the water and thought about it. And then I decided I was done being sad about Callum. He wasn't worth more than one night. At the end of week 2 I was ready. I'd arranged to stay with a cousin of mine who lives in the Clintonville neighborhood, about 15 minutes from our house. Just temporarily, until I figured out the next step. She asked no questions. She just said, "Of course. Room's yours as long as you need it." On a Sunday afternoon while Laurel was at her sister's for brunch, I'd verified she would be gone for at least 3 hours. I loaded what I needed into my truck. Clothes, my laptop, a few personal items that mattered to me, my grandfather's watch, Biscuit's food and his bed and his leash, because Biscuit was coming with me. She'd had him before we got together, but we'd both cared for him, and I wasn't leaving without the dog. By the time Laurel got home, I was gone. I had left one thing on the kitchen counter. A single envelope with her name on it. Inside was a note that said, "The divorce paperwork will arrive within the week. Don't contact me." That was it. No confrontation, no screaming match, no dramatic scene at the door. I was just gone. Her first call came at 6:47 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. I did not listen to the voicemail. She called 4 more times that night. Then she started texting, long texts, then short ones. Then what I assumed were emotional ones, because they were just question marks. And my name over and over. I didn't respond to any of them. The next morning I went to a phone store and changed my number. I told them it was for personal reasons. The guy behind the counter didn't ask anything further. I gave my new number to my cousin, my mom, my 2 sisters, 3 coworkers I trusted, and my attorney. That was the entire list. 3 days after I left, Callum reached out through social media. I'd already preemptively blocked his number on my old phone, which I'd since wiped and traded in. So he went through Instagram. His message was a long one. I could see the length of it in the preview. I didn't open it. I blocked the account. Then I deactivated all of my social media. Not just blocked. Deactivated. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Gone. A version of me that had existed online since college, just quietly removed. At work I told my HR department that I was going through a personal situation and asked them to screen my calls at the front desk. They were professional about it. Nobody pushed. The divorce paperwork was served to Laurel about 9 days after I left. I know this because my attorney confirmed service. That was how I found out it had happened. Not from Laurel. Not from anyone in her circle. From my attorney, in a 2-sentence email. The response, apparently, was not quiet. My attorney told me that Laurel had called her office several times in the days following service. She had questions. She had feelings about the grounds cited. The infidelity filing. My attorney handled it. I didn't have to handle any of it. About 3 weeks in, I started getting calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I stopped answering those too. One of them turned out to be Laurel's sister, who'd gotten a new number specifically to get through to me. When I realized what was happening, I just blocked the number without responding. Then her mother tried. And this one genuinely surprised me. Callum's older sister. She and I had always gotten along fine, at barbecues and birthday parties and the occasional holiday. She called me and left a voicemail on my new number, which meant someone had passed it along. I quietly figured out who had shared it. And that person was removed from the list. I changed my number again. Second time in 6 weeks. The new list was even shorter. Now, I want to be honest about something. There were moments during this period when I questioned myself. Not about leaving. I never questioned that. But about the method. About the silence. There were nights at my cousin's house when I'd be lying in the dark and I'd think, maybe I should have confronted them. Maybe I deserved the screaming match. Maybe disappearing like this is its own kind of cowardice. I thought about it seriously, and then I thought about what a confrontation would have actually given me. Would it have given me answers? They would have lied or rationalized or cried, and I would have sat there, absorbing it, and I would have left anyway, just angrier and more drained. Would it have given me closure? Closure is a thing you give yourself. It doesn't come from the other person. I know that now. I was not being a coward. I was protecting myself from a process that would have cost me more than it gave me. Biscuit seemed to agree. He slept on the foot of my bed every night, like nothing had changed, and everything was fine. About 2 months after I left, I made another decision. Columbus was manageable, but I'd been thinking about a transfer for a while. My company had a regional hub in Nashville that had been trying to recruit from Columbus for 2 years. I'd always said no because of the house, because of Laurel, because of roots. Those reasons were gone now. I called my regional manager and told him I wanted to revisit the Nashville conversation. He almost fell out of his chair. 2 weeks later, I had a formal offer. Better title, better pay, about 14% more than I was making, plus a relocation package. I accepted it on a Thursday and gave notice the following Monday. I found an apartment in Nashville through a leasing service. Paid first month, last month and deposit. Signed the lease over email. Never visited it in person before I moved in. Loading up the moving truck, my cousin stood on her porch and said, "You know you don't have to run." I said, "I know, I'm not running, I'm starting." She hugged me and told me to call her. I told her I would. I have. The Nashville apartment was on the 4th floor of a newer building in the Germantown neighborhood. High ceilings, big windows. A little balcony I never really used but liked knowing was there. I set up my furniture in 2 days, unpacked in a week, and by the 3rd week I felt more at home than I had in my house in Columbus, in the last 2 years of my marriage. Biscuit loved the dog park 2 blocks away. The divorce itself was mostly handled by attorneys on both sides. Ohio allows for no-fault divorce. But the infidelity filing affected the asset division. The house had been purchased primarily with my income. Laurel worked in nonprofit fundraising and made about 40% of what I did. The equity split reflected that, ultimately. I got the larger share. My attorney was good. I didn't attend any hearings in person. Everything that could be handled remotely was. The divorce was finalized about 4 months after I filed. I was in Nashville by then. I remember getting the confirmation email from my attorney on a Wednesday afternoon. I read it, I sat with it for a minute, and then I took Biscuit to the dog park and watched him run around with a golden retriever named Potato for 45 minutes, and I felt fine. Actually fine. Not happy exactly, but settled. Like a chapter had closed cleanly instead of being ripped out. I want to tell you about something that happened about 6 months after I moved to Nashville, because I think it's important. A guy I'd worked with briefly in Columbus. We weren't close, just friendly. Liked each other. He texted me. I'd given him my number at some point before everything happened. And somehow it survived both number changes, because I'd given him the second one when I was getting settled in Nashville. He reached out just to say hey. He'd heard I was in Nashville, how was it going? We texted back and forth a bit. Normal stuff. And then he said, almost in passing, "Hey, I ran into Callum a few weeks ago. He was asking about you, seemed pretty torn up." I stared at that text for a while, and then I wrote back, "Yeah, some things don't work out, that was all." He didn't push, we're still in casual touch, good guy. But the thing that hit me wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger. It was just nothing. Like hearing about a stranger. The person who had been my best friend for 13 years had become someone I felt genuinely nothing about. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It just is what it is. I heard through the Columbus grapevine. Via my cousin. Who occasionally filtered information to me if she thought I needed it. That Laurel and Callum were still together. That apparently she'd been telling people I had abandoned her without any explanation. That framing made me laugh out loud when I heard it. She was the one who'd spent God knows how many months in my best friend's apartment while I was at work. But she got to write the narrative for the people in her circle. And that was fine. Those were her people. I didn't want them. I've been in Nashville for almost a year now. I got promoted at work about 3 months ago. Moved into a senior operations role that I'd been angling toward for a while. Better hours. More autonomy. A team of 6 people I actually like. I make more money than I ever did in Columbus. I live in a neighborhood where I can walk to good coffee and a farmer's market on weekends. I've made a handful of genuine friends here, co-workers mostly, and a couple guys from a recreational soccer league I joined on a whim. One of them asked me recently, at a bar after a game, if I was seeing anyone. He asked it the way guys do, casually, no real expectation. I said not right now, I'm good, and I meant it. I wasn't guarding myself or being deliberately alone. I just wasn't in a hurry. I'd spent a long time building a life around other people's presence and not enough time figuring out what I actually wanted my life to look like on its own terms. I was enjoying the process of finding out. The last thing I want to say is this. A few months ago, my mom called me. We talk every week or two. She's in Dayton. My sisters are spread around the Midwest. We stay in touch. She's never pressured me about any of it. She'd expressed her sadness when everything happened, but she'd never told me what to do or tried to broker peace, or any of that. But that particular call, she mentioned that she'd run into Laurel's mother at a grocery store. Apparently the woman had said something along the lines of, hoping things could be worked out someday, that I was still like family to them. My mom relayed this to me carefully, like she wasn't sure how I'd take it. I said, "Mom, I appreciate you telling me, but they made their choices a long time ago, and those choices have consequences." There was a pause on the line. Then she said, "I know, honey, I just wanted you to know." I told her I loved her. She told me she was proud of me, which she doesn't say often, and it landed differently than I expected. I hung up and sat on my balcony for a while. Nashville was doing its evening thing below me. Traffic easing up. The light going orange and then purple. A couple walking their dog on the sidewalk below. Biscuit sitting next to my chair watching them with solemn professional judgment. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even particularly satisfied in the way revenge stories usually end. There was no dramatic moment of them seeing what they'd lost. No confrontation where I got the last word. No grand gesture. There was just this. A life I'd built in a city I'd chosen for myself, doing work I was good at. Surrounded by people who actually knew me. Quiet, steady. Mine. Some people hear a story like mine and they want to know if I think they'll ever realize what they did. If they'll feel the full weight of it someday. Honestly, I don't know. And it stopped being my problem the moment I pulled out of that driveway and pointed my truck south. The number they used to call? Disconnected a long time ago. The account they used to message? Closed. The man they thought would wait around for an explanation? He's sitting on a balcony in Nashville, watching the sun go down, while his dog silently judges the pedestrians below. He's doing just fine.